First of all, I would like to thank you, Shraddha ma'am, to join us for the session. Thank you so much, ma'am, for giving us the time. And eventually, I know this session will be much enlightening for the teenagers as well as us as a team. And first, welcome you all. I, Tejaswini Thakur, welcome you all on the behalf of Blub World for this session. And I would really request you, ma'am, that if you can enlighten the students in teenagers with your words, with your opening address, so that we can start off the sessions and then we'll move on to the Q&A.
Thank you so much. And on behalf of UN Women, I am really happy to be here and to be interacting with a bunch of really promising young people. So thank you for the opportunity. Can you all hear me? Yes? Great. Can all of you use the Zoom platform really well? Because I'd really like it if we make this a little interactive. So yes, perfect. Asim, thanks for the thumbs up. I can see Saida giving me a thumbs up. Can everyone give me a thumbs up? Go to the react button and give me a thumbs up so that I know all of you are awake wherever you are. Thanks, Tehzeeb, Param, Prachi, Jude, Asim. Great. I can see lots of people are awake and about. Yeah, great. So as you can see, my name is Shraddha, and I work with an organization called UN Women, right? Do any of you know what UN stands for? And please feel free to unmute yourself and speak, because like I said, while the opening address is about me, I would really, really like it if I hear from you as well. Anyone knows what UN is? Just unmute and speak. It's perfectly fine.
UN is the abbreviation for United Nations.
Perfect. UN stands for United Nations, and United Nations is made up of a lot of specific agencies, specialized agencies. And you, as you can very well guess from the name, my agency's mandate is to work on women's empowerment and gender equality. So I have been working with the United Nations for about 2 years now. And before that, I have been working with various civil society organizations on various issues, and also done my PhD, taught in a university, and so on and so forth. But today we're going to talk about women leaders, right? So before we start, I'm going to ask you to, tickle your brain cells a little bit. So I mean it when I say that I'm going to make it interactive. So those of you who have a pen and paper, others who prefer whatever devices they are logged in, either your phone or your laptop, I would like you to jot down answers to the questions that I'm going to ask, right? So I'll give you a minute to either open your Word notepad or, fetch a pencil and some paper. I don't want you to put anything on chat. This is for you to do like a reflective exercise. There will be other questions where you do put stuff on chat, or like I'm happy to have you just unmute and speak, right? But just so that we don't have too many people speaking at the same time, right now, what we're going to do is introspect. So everyone ready? Great. Quickly now, you have about 30 to 40 seconds, okay? You have to make a list of 10 people, 10 sports women, any sport, any country, sport to women. Quickly make a list of 10 sports women. And obviously, I would like you not to use any search engine but your brains. No Google, Bing, or anything else. Because that's an easy one, right? This is about what you can think of off the top of your heads. Just the names of 10 sports women. I'm assuming that those who are off camera are also at it. And happy for the Blub World team to also give it a shot. Trisha, are you already done? I hope the rest of you, Param, Bez, Prachi, Devaj, Asim, Aritri, all of you are writing. Another 10 seconds. Asim's done, it looks like. You have to be a sports buff if you're done that fast. 10 sportswomen. We're at the brink of Olympics. Okay, pencils and fingers down. How many of you were able to write 10 names of sportswomen? Give me a thumbs up. Exams over. Give me a thumbs up. I can only see Sapna, okay, Janav, Paki's been able to write 10. I assume the rest of you still have fewer names, right? Not 10. Devaj, do you want to say something? Great. So that's 10 sportswomen. Can we move on to the next question now? Everyone ready? The brain's ticking. Now I want you to write the name of, and this time it's only five global women leaders. Names of 5 global women leaders. So they need not be heads of state, but somebody like Hillary Clinton. And now because I've said it, you can't write Hillary Clinton. But you know, everyone's heard of her. Everyone knows her. She contested the US elections the last time. So somebody of that stature, right? 5 names. And you have another 10 seconds. 5 names. Global women leaders. Another 5 seconds, people, before the pencils and fingers stop. And Sapna's got it again. Sapna, you done? Great. All right, stop writing, stop typing. Tell me how many of you got that one? All 5. We're not bothering with the answers. Just being able to quickly, off the top of your head, be able to, you know, just think of women, think of famous women. Great. So I can see that there's about 26 people in the room, and I have only seen about 5 to 7 thumbs up, right? We talked about only 2 arenas here. We talked about global, you know, just leading the world, whether it's politics, whatever. And we talked about sports. And we were only thinking of 10 sportswomen and 5 world leaders. How difficult was it to come up with names? Would anyone like to unmute? Somebody who didn't get it. Would anyone like to unmute and share? Johan, you were smiling. Would you like to? Is it Johan?
No, it's Johan.
Johan, sorry.
Yeah.
Would you like to share? How was it? Easy, difficult?
Like, okay.
I don't want to pick on you, but you were grinning, and I just thought I'll ask you.
Okay, like, well, for the sports one, I was only able to name 2 because, well, I don't know, I don't really watch too much women's sports, but for the global politics, I watch a lot. So, but however, I was able to only name 3 for the leaders.
I'm curious, which 3?
The one was the former Prime Minister of India, Indira Gandhi. Then the current Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni. Then thirdly, it is the US Speaker of the House before, former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi.
Wow, great, great. And are you from India?
Yeah, I'm from India.
Oh, great. Anyone else would like to share? Anybody, probably somebody who got all 10? Or just any one of you? Any, Tehzeeb, do you want to speak?
I actually had to think a lot and the time ran out, so I couldn't write everything.
Right.
Especially I faced problem in the sportswoman names.
Okay, I just because I was doing this exercise when I was planning this session with you all, how many of you, when you were writing sportswomen, how many of you wrote tennis players? This is just my curiosity. Just raise your hands. How many of you wrote about tennis players? Thanks. High five to you, Asim. Okay, great. Because when I started thinking about sportswomen, I think the Wimbledon and the Grand Slam are some of the publicized sports, and I know you all are very young, but Steffi Graf is somebody I grew up, and that makes me feel very old, but Steffi Graf is somebody I grew up watching. So, and then I made, so there's a lot of homework that happens. I made my husband do it. He also came up with all tennis players. So we were just laughing about how India works, right? There are certain sports who get a lot of limelight. And so there are certain sports women who quickly pop up in your head more than the others. But that's a tangent. We'll come back to the topic. The idea of making you do this was also to just think about how many women have global spotlight, right? We are here from different countries. We are thinking about global women leaders, but we are sort of struggling to even name a few, right? And sportswomen aren't even necessarily leaders in that sense. But what are they? They're role models, right? And role models are very, very important. Can anybody say why role models are important? Anyone?
They lead food and then they motivate others, and hence they kind of, they help in bringing up a good society.
They motivate, they help sensitize, they bring limelight on an issue, and they say a very simple message that if I can do it, you probably can do it as well, right? And whatever that it may be, it could be a woman in a corporate setting, it could be like a world leader, Indira Gandhi, like Johan said, it could be anybody, right? So role models are really important. And if you don't have role models who you can relate to, then sometimes you sort of feel like, you don't know whether this field is for you, right? And so it's very, very important to have women in all sectors, women not just participating, but women in leadership. Women in leadership, like I said, are great models. But for the very fact that women make up half of the world means that they should also make up half of the leadership as a very obvious logic representation, right? Because if you're half of the world and if your leaders don't represent you, then the decisions that are taken may sometimes leave you out. And so because we are half of the world, we should be half of boardrooms, courtrooms, police rooms, war rooms, but also peace negotiations, village councils, right? And that's why it's important for women to be leaders. Also, when they're at the table, when they're discussing, when they're thinking, they will bring up their part of the story and therefore improve and ensure diverse outcomes, right? They may innovate in a different way, they may bring different qualities to the table and therefore have different and possibly improved outcomes. And again, we are talking in generic terms, but we are going to kind of deep dive and think about what these outcomes are. And there have been enormous studies done about thinking, for example, now we're talking hard data, where you see that whether it's a gender diverse company as against a company which is largely homogeneous and male dominated, there have been substantial increase in the profit, the performance differentials, right? There have been studies, you can look up McKinsey, you look up Credit Suisse, and there is huge margins that are seen when women are part of not just the workforce, but the senior leadership. This is just sort of like a background information. What we are going to do now is actually think about specific sectors and with examples, think about what is the kind of difference women leaders have made, right? So like I said, I represent United Nations, and United Nations, one of the most important things that United Nations or concepts that United Nations has given to the world is the concept of, can anyone guess? What is the most important sort of concept, principle, value that United Nations stands for? Anyone?
Is
Yes,
it
Disha?
unity in humanity?
Sorry?
Unity in humanity.
Is saying gender equality. No, the concept is human rights. Everyone's heard of that? Can anyone give me an example of a human right that they know? And you can put it in the chat, I'm fine with it. What are human rights? Anyone? Just unmute and speak.
Right of life.
Great, thank you, Sapna. Right to life, right to education, right? Right to freedom, right to speech. There's a bunch of them. And we'll not kind of go into the details. You can, of course, again, read up. But these are inalienable, universal rights. What does that mean? Any person of any age, nationality, region, religion, race, all of us have human rights. When you're born on earth, you are automatically, sort of, human rights are automatically bestowed upon. And who kind of protects them, enshrines them? It is our respective governments who do that, right? Our governments who are part of the United Nations. So these human rights and this idea of human rights was born. I mean, of course, there's a huge long history of, like revolution and charters and so on and so forth. But there was something called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And this Universal Declaration was also signed by member states in 1948. So I'm talking about more than 60, 70 years ago, right? In 1948, this Universal Declaration of Human Rights was signed. Do you know who was the president, who was the chairperson? Chairperson, mind you, not chairman, and it wasn't a man. Who is the chairperson of the commission or the committee who sort of drafted the human rights? Any guesses? Again, I would like for you not to kind of venture to Google. Any idea? And again, the running head is to think about what women's contributions are and why women's leadership at the decision-making table is important. Yes, Prisha.
Ma'am, she was Eleanor Roosevelt. She served
Great.
as the first person of Human Rights Commission.
Absolutely. And do you know who she was?
Ma'am, she served as the first chairperson of the UNHRC committee.
Yes, she was the chairperson and she was the first lady of United States. Eleanor Roosevelt was the first lady of United States and therefore was in a position of influence and is well known for her work in ensuring a really inclusive and dynamic declaration on human rights, right? But the biographer of Eleanor Roosevelt has documented this fact, and the Human Rights Declaration, when it was being written up, read, all men are born free and equal in dignity and rights. And there is a woman who is credited to have taken objection to this line and replaced the word all men with all humans. Any guesses who that was? It was a sari-clad woman from the state which our current Prime Minister belongs to, which the Indian Prime Minister belongs to. And I see a lot of people who are potentially from India in this group right now. So maybe any guesses? Given lots of clues. Madam Hansa Mehta. Her name was Madam Hansa Mehta. Don't have a whole lot of time and I would like to cover a lot of things. So she was in like sort of credited to have changed all men. This all men, which actually already excludes half of the population, to all human beings, right? All human beings are born free and equal in rights and dignity. So the fact that she was there at the table, the fact that she was aware of this kind of exclusionary language, very important in ensuring that going forward, these declarations were inclusive of all human beings and not just all men. Now, mind you, when people were writing all men, were they wanting to exclude women? No. But we know that language, the way it works, actually assumes that when you say men, it includes women, whereas actually the word women includes men. So I don't know why they don't write all women and vice versa, right? But all human beings is even more inclusive in actually specifically saying it. Similarly, there were other women who were also part of this drafting committee, right? Women from Pakistan, women from other, developing countries who were part of this. Now, this is what is important in having women at the table when you're drafting things, making policies, and so on and so forth. And where are these decisions made? These are made in the parliament, right? These decisions are made in the parliament. But right now, we have only 26% approximately of parliamentary seats worldwide which are held by women. Parliamentary seats are in typically like it works in India and in a lot of South Asian countries. There are elections, and then if you win the elections is only when you are able to kind of be part of the parliament where all your policies and laws are deliberated and decisions for public good are made, right? Similarly, there are only 20 odd countries right now where women are heads of state. 20 is only countries is only 10% of UN member states. Again, only 22% women are holding ministerial positions in various governments. And what are the typical ministries that you think are given to women? Any guesses? Typically, again, it is the health, education, women and child ministries, which are typically allocated to women. Thankfully, in India, thanks Prachi, the Minister for Finance happens to be a woman. She's the second woman to be the Minister of Finance in India. The first one, of course, was a joint sort of charge, which was again Indira Gandhi, right? So, does anyone, again, just a quick sort of teaser, does anyone know who was the first woman prime minister of any country? She also happens to be from the South Asian region. We've actually had a lot of heads of state in South Asia. Any guesses? I don't know if anybody is there from, no, Vinay, it's not Indira Gandhi, but it's our neighbor. I don't know if there's anybody from Sri Lanka here. Is there? It is Sirimovo Bandaranaike. She, in the 60s, was, I think in 1960, if I'm not mistaken, she was the first woman prime minister of a country and made history and allowed for, again, role modeling, allowed for a lot of women. And we've had amazing women leadership recently as well. We've had Angela Merkel, for example, who was the Chancellor of Germany from 2005 to 21, a really, really long term. She was part of shaping European policies and ensuring that the Eurozone crisis didn't deteriorate, and also making really, really strong environmental laws. I'm sure all of you have heard of Angela Merkel, right? She recently sort of resigned and passed on the baton. There has been Jacinda Ardern, again, really famous. Anyone knows which country I'm talking about? Jacinda Ardern? Do any of you know?
New Zealand, if I'm not
Yes,
wrong.
New Zealand. She was appreciated for the empathy she showed when there were shootings in her country. She was appreciated. Of course, I mean, there is no one who's above criticism, but she was also appreciated for how she handled the COVID crisis in the country. And there have been other examples. There is somebody called Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who was the first elected woman representative in Liberia. Liberia was undergoing a lot of strife, a lot of civil war, and she was actually awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for her efforts in putting the pieces back in her country, right? For helping the country heal. Again, in another African country, Rwanda, which I don't know how many of you are history buffs, but Rwanda has also seen enormous civil tensions, conflict, wars, ethnic strife. And then kind of in its healing phase, when things started getting better, there has been a very, very active role that women played in putting the country back in order. And Rwanda is now credited. I gave you the stats earlier where we are talking about 22%, 26%. In Rwanda, as on 2021, women hold 61% of the seats in their parliament, which is brilliant, right? Which is more than their actual representation, because they probably actually contested and won elections, right? And it has seen faster economic recovery and very, very inclusive policies. Any questions, any thoughts so far while I take a sip of water? Anything? Great. Okay. Then we think about the role that women play, and the last two examples spoke to it, but there is a whole kind of conversation within the UN about women, peace, and security. We have a lot of conflict in global, in the global sense. There is the Ukraine war, there is war happening. There is a lot of, unrest, for example, in South Sudan, in Congo, in other places. And there has been, in all of these wars, there is a disproportionate impact on women and children. For the longest time, and again, I'm kind of, the running thread is also what is the role of the UN, because that's the organization I represent. In all of this, there wasn't enough sort of recognition of the fact that there is huge amounts of gender-based violence that is a part of these, these conflicts, wars, attacks, and ethnic strife. And so it was women who lobbied, continued to kind of ask about accountability from United Nations, and eventually get the women, peace, and security agenda in place. So the fact that women need to be part of peace negotiations, part of decision making, part of governments, it was something that they had to sort of struggle and struggle and struggle. And it was only in 2000, in the year 2000, that the UN Security Council, which is the highest body within the entire UN system, it is the UN Security Council, they agreed that, they passed a resolution which recognized that women need to be part of all of these processes, and the fact that they need to take into account this huge conflict-related gender-based violence, right? It was only because women's groups, coalitions, leaders kept pestering that we need to be heard, we need to be part of these discussions, we need to be part of peacekeeping forces. So that agenda is also something that is very important. Now, moving to an area that you probably have known of, I'm sure your schools have made you write essays around this. Can you name any women climate change activists? And now, instead of just thinking for yourselves, it'll be good to kind of unmute and speak. Johan is really enjoying my lecture, looks like. But I will ask somebody who's not spoken yet to speak. Sure, Jude, go ahead. Sorry? I can't hear you. Maybe you should put it in the chat. Anyone else? I can't see anybody writing in the chat either. Prisha, I can see your hand, but I'd really like somebody who's not spoken yet to speak. Or, if you're uncomfortable, happily put it in the chat.
Namaste, ma'am.
Yes.
I'm Vinayak. I'm Vinayak Gupta.
Yeah.
One name I would like to give is Vandana Shiva, who is an Indian environmentalist, and she is referred to as Gandhi of Grain for her activism associated with anti-GMO movement.
Yes, thank you, Vinayak. And Jude, I thought you said Greta, but I couldn't hear you. I now can see that you've written it in the chat. Vengari Mathai, Jennifer Morgan, great. And yes, Vinayak, Vandana Shiva is credited to have started what is known as the eco-feminist movement in India. Yes. And her organization has done some amazing work, and she continues to sort of push the conversation. Yes. Now, all of these people have done enormous work. Vengari Mathai has another sort of very, very recognized person who, again, brought other women with her. And millions and millions of trees planted, a huge movement created in Kenya, right? Greta, bringing people in, creating an inclusive politics, and ensuring that age is not a factor in how you advocate. Continuously, she started with just sitting outside her school, right? One person sitting outside her school, and see the impact. Today, there is not a cop that, one doesn't see her in. So that's the kind of power that she was able to sort of demonstrate. We may disagree with certain things, agree with certain things, but just in terms of the trajectory of leadership. But again, what does it mean when we have women at decision-making tables? There is Gro Harlem, who was the former Prime Minister of Norway, who actually coined the idea sustainable development. So it's not only about pushing gendered agendas, but pushing inclusive agendas. So this idea that, there is a certain kind of development and there is a certain kind of, more and more. So more corporate, more technology, more industry, more ammunition. But then everyone had to sort of take a step back and think about, but what after? What is the planet we're handing down to the future generations? And then this whole concept of sustainability came into the picture, right? This concept, although you probably think it's all been around, it is not something that has been around forever. It's something that people have sort of, that has become mainstream only in the last sort of 1 or 2 decades. It wasn't something that everyone always was thinking about, that we need to do something that is environmentally conscious. We need to do something that doesn't harm the planet. So GROW is kind of credited to have helped develop this idea. Again, another person called Christina Figueres. She's the executive secretary of UNFCCC, which is the UN framework on, the climate change. And she was pivotal in sort of these negotiations around the Paris Agreement. Now, the Paris, you will see that there are these big conversations that happen, global conversations, and heads of state go there, and they make commitments that we will reduce our carbon emissions, we will ensure that our, economy is environment friendly, we will do X, Y, and Z, we will replace our fossil fuels, and so on and so forth. So these kind of agreements, a strong agreement means that member states have to make strong commitments. And person's Christina Figueres, who is the executive secretary in the UN body which deals with these kind of climate related issues, was able to talk about a really strong agreement in Paris. She's also credited with talking about climate optimism, right? Which means that it is an active choice. Because if you think about it, it's a very grim situation. But if we only think about it negatively, we are not going to be able to do anything. So she talks about climate optimism, where she thinks that it is both a choice and a necessity. So she allows you to also think about climate as one step at a time, one individual at a time. This is also something that now India is adopting through its mission life and all of that, right? So just also talking about women in the climate space. Any questions so far? Anything anyone would like to add? And I can see there is more names, Vanessa Nakate, Chandi Prasad Bhatt, yes, Montreal Protocol. Of course, there are a lot of these protocols, Hanya, and Montreal is one of them. Elizabeth Wanjiru Wathuti, I assume this is also somebody who's been like a global climate activist. Any thoughts, any comments?
Ma'am, we have anyway got so many questions that they have submitted before. So if you want to take one from there.
No, we can go on. There's a fair bit that I have to go on to. So I'm just kind of giving everyone some break to think about. Then we come to women in science. And what do you think is the value add in women being a fundamental part of research? Any thoughts?
Ma'am, like in the Chandrayaan-3
Absolutely.
initiatives, women have there was maximum means participation and participation of women in the success of the Chandrayaan-3.
Yes, yes. And Asim, yes, Marie Curie is a name that you can't really sort of skip when you think about women in science. Dhanya, please unmute yourself and speak.
Yeah, I was also about to talk about Marie Curie only. She was set like the basis fundamentals of the science that we
Absolutely.
all study. And
Absolutely.
we couldn't be very well.
Great. So, Tazzy,
How about Rosalind Franklin?
yes. All of them, yes. Rosalind Franklin and her contribution to science has been quite interesting. Hanya.
Yes, ma'am. One such is Rosalind Franklin, who has been very big contribution in chemistry, significantly to the discovery of DNA.
Yes, absolutely. And there are many, many, many such names. I would really, really recommend that you watch this interesting film called Hidden Figures. I can put the name in chat. I am not sure whether it's on Netflix or which other OTT platform, but it's a really interesting film which talks about women in science, but it also talks about other issues. But what happens is that men's and women's experiences are different. And if you have only one category of people doing science, then it is incomplete. And so we need what I would term as gender inclusive research. Women researchers advocate and conduct gender inclusive research by ensuring that both men, women, and other genders are included in as required in the kind of inquiry that they are making, so that the needs and responses of all genders, and mind you, there are not two, but many genders, are leading to more effective solutions, right? And I'll give you an example. There's somebody called Alison McGregor who actually looked at gender specific medicine. Her research focused on how diseases and treatments affect men and women differently. And so she kept highlighting how sex and gender differences need to be a central part of thinking about medical research, right? Then you talk about innovations and addressing social issues. A lot of time, women innovators tend to solve pressing social issues which contribute to more affordable technologies or sustainable environment practices and so on and so forth. Another example, Dr. Rebecca Gompertz. She's a physician and activist. And again, for every example I give, you'll find 10,000 other examples. This is just one person that I picked up on. That doesn't mean they're necessarily the best. But Rebecca Gompertz is somebody who started this organization called Women on Waves, which provided specifically reproductive health services, including safe abortions for women, and advocated for safe and accessible health rights, right? Again, picking up again on Hidden Figures. Hidden Figures is a story of women in certain kind of technological spaces. And it's a story of 3 women specifically, but they were 3 Black women who contributed immensely to science. And that is another thing that happens when you have diverse people, promoting diversity in research. So it is very essential for, ensuring that your solutions are geared towards the diversity of the population. Again, an example of Dr. Mae Jemison, who was the first African-American woman, Dr. Mae Jemison, the first African-American woman to travel into space and became like a vocal advocate for diversity in STEM. STEM is science, technology, engineering, and maths, of course. She founded the Dorothy Jameson Foundation for Excellence and promoted, science education for minority students. So here we actually come across another concept which is very important in gender studies. It is called intersectionality. And again, I'm putting it in the chat, you all. For those of you interested in social development and social theory, sorry, I made a typo. Yeah. So intersectionality is when you don't think only about men and women as homogeneous groups, but think also about, like in this example of women, and then women being either Black women or white women or Asian women or brown or yellow and so on. Or, there being class differences, there being regional differences and so on and so forth, and how these build upon one another. Again, I bring this concept not to make it complex for you, but to also note the point that Kimberly Crenshaw, a Black civil rights activist in the US and an academic, is the one who sort of thought about this concept. And this concept has become absolutely almost overused concept in social development and social sciences and the development jargon, so to say. But again, Crenshaw, with her leadership and insight, was able to develop this idea of how various kinds of disprivileges, being a woman, being Black, being poor, built on top of one another, and how it disadvantaged Black women, right? Because she was continuously working on Black women's rights. And that's when she theorized this concept. We are going to sort of shift focus a little bit and talk about how women have been understood throughout development. And I will sort of close with that because I know I need some time for question answers. There are these principles of WID. So in the 70s, when the world was kind of awakening to understanding that women need to be part of the conversation, the feminist movements across the world were on a swing, the UN was taking cognizance. The idea was women in development, right? And then people thought, oh, women need to be employed, they should get education, resources, da. But then people realized that this is a very narrow way of looking at it. So we moved on to women and development, where we started talking about, we should not only think about including women, but also think about why they are being excluded. Women and development. But again, it overlooked the role of men and thinking about men. So we moved on to a more broader concept of gender and development. So this is called WID-WAD-GAD. Then there is gender and development, which emerged, these two concepts emerged in the 70s. The third one emerged in the 80s, where people were talking about how both men and women need to kind of think about gender equality, women's rights, so on and so forth. But again, that also came under some kind of criticism for being too broad and not specifically addressing women's issues. And we've moved on with women-led development, where we talk about women's leadership, we talk about inclusion, participation, we talk about twin approaches. We want something to be specifically about women, and we want some things where gender is mainstreamed, right? So it's certain areas where women are way behind, which need targeted interventions to ensure that they are part of the conversation. And in all other conversations, we want to ensure that they are part of the mainstream, right? So these are some sort of broad concepts that I want to leave you with. And of course, in terms of time, I think we're left with about 15 minutes. So over to you.
So someone who want to ask the question, you can directly unmute yourself or you can just raise your hand, ma'am, and ma'am can take direct question. Or else I have some submissions also. So we can take the question from there. So Prisha has a question, ma'am. We'll take Prisha's question. Prisha, please unmute yourself and please ask the question.
So, ma'am, I had a question like, how were you able to come to the stage like this? Like, if I were aspire to be working in UN, so how will it be possible? Like, what steps should I take?
Thank you, Prisha. If you want to work with the UN, one is that you need to have a good amount of education. Two is to have good solid work experience in your field, right? So you need to be able to have a solid work experience and be able to sort of have grassroots levels experience and work for a couple of years before you apply to the UN if you want like a regular job. There are other also options. There is something called UN volunteers. There are internships. So I would say kind of figure out what your specialization is, get a little bit of work experience, and then start sort of applying for UN jobs. I hope that answers your question. I think Dhanya's raised her hand.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Go for it, Dhanya.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I actually wanted to ask something about the UN, how it works. So basically, how can we reassure ourselves about worth and capabilities amidst, social and gender comparisons? And then how can women overcome the fear of failure and become real role models? And how does women actually, play a role in shaping that kind of a significant thing?
Great. I didn't hear the first part of your question. I heard, what I heard is how can women overcome hurdles and sort of become role models, and what is the role of women?
How can we actually how can we reassure ourselves of our worth and capabilities when we have societal and gender comparisons and overcome our fear?
Right. Okay. So
and how does youth play a role in that?
Yes. So one of the biggest things that the UN does actually is, and I didn't get a chance to talk about that, but there are a lot of these global frameworks on gender equality. So UN held, for example, various conferences. They started in Mexico, and the fourth one, which was the biggest one, happened in Beijing. And in Beijing, they said, and you can look this up, Dhanya, it's called the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, BPFA. About 160 odd countries actually signed this declaration. It has 12 areas, and it has, like, about with whatever the issues were at that time. So you cannot believe it, but technology was not one of them, because back in 1995, when this happened, technology was not as big as it is right now, right? So the UN creates these global frameworks, and then the member countries. So, for example, if you're in India, if you're in Sweden, whichever members countries have to live up to that. So they have to make laws, policies, and all of that. So once you've signed, what essentially means is that the country says that we pledge to hold ourselves accountable to that. We pledge to hold ourselves accountable to ensuring that gender equality on all of these 12 areas is at this level. And they are answerable. So they write reports, they attend conferences, they present what steps they have taken, what are the policies that you have done, what are the programs that you have implemented, what kind of laws do you have or don't have, how are they being implemented, what are the rates of crimes against women. So these kind of reports happen. So BPFA, CEDAW, these are some of the instruments that UN has put into place. Now, as far as women having faith in themselves, I mean, look around you. There are, just look around you in terms of where your grandmother was, where your mother was, and where you are. I am giving you my example. My mother's mother was married at the age of 13. She didn't even finish her 10th. My mother is a doctor. I have a PhD, right? I have a PhD after I got married. I had a child when I was having my PhD, which means I have a really supportive partner who doesn't have a PhD, but isn't insecure because his wife is educated, right? We've come from a place where women were told, and I know that this is the case in South Asian cultures and may not be the case in others, but we're catching up, where women were told not to get too educated because then it's difficult to find a group. But now, things are different. So, I mean, there is already a huge amount of change, but there is a long way to go. So we should, and everything around us should only end. The government is keen on gender equality. Every agency of the UN Women specifically works on gender, but every agency, whether it's UNICEF, which works with children, whether it's UNDP, which works on general development and climate change, every agency is supposed to ensure gender is part of their work. So that's our commitment. I see a lot of hands, so I'll take the next question. Tehzeeb, you've put in a question in the chat saying, how much influence do women activists and leaders have in their respective fields? I thought my talk gave you an insight about exactly that. I talked about climate change and development and science and so on. So, I mean, the examples were meant to sort of show you what, for example, from changing words to ensure women are included to, the kind of research we have done and so on. So unless there is a follow-up question, I'll leave it at that and move on to, I think, Mariam.
Yes. Hi. Good evening. I'm really interested in becoming a UNICEF Youth Global Ambassador, particularly, like advocate for gender equality and women's empowerment, given the importance of these issues. So, like, could you provide information on how I might join and apply for this role?
Mariam, I am not aware of how specifically the role that you talked about works, but I'm sure you'll find the information online. What I would say is, irrespective of the role, and I'm sure you'll find, and I'm sure that having made it to the work in Parliament, you are already a really motivated and dedicated team. What you need to do is ensure that you are already thinking about and taking steps within your capacities and resources towards gender equality. Look around you, think about what kind of you can do, start writing up, start doing things, and start ensuring that you document it all. And I'm sure that will help your application in becoming the ambassador that you want to be. Right?
so much. Thank you so
Great.
much.
I am Vinayak. Asim, I see your hands, but I'm going to go with Hania because she hasn't spoken much and then come to you. I hope you don't mind. Hania.
Thank you, ma'am, for providing me with this golden opportunity. I'm MP Hania Jabbar from Jammu and Kashmir, and my question to you is that what is the most pressing issue facing women today that you think doesn't get like enough attention?
Very interesting. I will have to think about it. The two things that I didn't have the time to talk about, Hania, were in all of this, the obstacles that women face are I'm not sure that this doesn't necessarily get enough attention, but it doesn't get enough intervention, is the issue of gender-based violence. And
Yes.
this issue of gender-based violence is extremely serious, and it keeps women from achieving their full potential, right? And this is very, very complex, and also it pervades all spaces. Gender-based violence is prevalent in your homes, in your schools, in your offices, in the streets, right? And all of us sort of have been socialized to think about it as part of our daily lives, right? If I'm traveling, I need to think about what time of the day I'm going out, whether I have public transport at the right time. If I don't, do I have the money and the resources? So, it is something that all women are sort of programmed to think about and learn to deal with. And I think it requires a lot of support from men, lot of kind of activism and, like sort of coming strictly down in terms of the laws and policy to be able to address it. I hope I've answered your question, Hania. Over to you, Asim, and then Vivek.
Oh, ma'am, am I audible?
Yes.
Good evening, ma'am. I'm Asim Ahmad Khan of grade 10th Administrative School, Hyderabad, Telangana, India. I'm a teen member of the Parliament of Third World Team Parliament. My question for you is, what policy changes do you believe are most critical to supporting and increasing the number of women in leadership roles in India?
Thank you, Asim. That's a great question. I think we are in India, thankfully, on the right track. We've just had a historic bill passed. Can anyone tell me what this bill is? Because there's so many people from India.
42% of the reservation bill in Parliament.
Yes, absolutely. The Women's Reservation Bill, which is very, very important. Unfortunately, although the bill was passed before the elections, it was not applicable for 2024 general elections, which is like a heartbreak for people like me who've sort of been waiting for the bill to be passed. So that is a great step forward. But I think, Asim, we are doing an amazing job in terms of the number of women that are already there in panchayats, which is the village level council for those of you who are not from India. So village level councils in India have since 1993-94 village councils as well as municipal councils, which are urban bodies and rural bodies, already had reservations. And following reservations, women have been able to also compete in unreserved seats, right? And similarly, there is a law which says that women should be part of boardrooms. Again, unfortunately, it is a very tokenistic appointment. And I think we need more and more women to kind of get promoted into boardrooms, cross the glass ceiling. Again, to kind of link it back to Hania's question, two things: marriage and children, and the work associated with the house keep women from getting into the workforce. India as a country has the highest number of STEM graduates. Again, science, technology, engineering, and medicine. Highest number of STEM graduates, very few people percolating in research institutes and senior management positions in science institutes. What happens? Household and domestic responsibilities. If the law and policy situation in the country, as well as individuals, all of you, all of us, distribute the care work, who cooks, who cleans, who looks after the children and the elderly, all of that. If we distribute the care work, and it's not individual, it needs to be more systematic, we will definitely have more women in the workforce, in public. Great question. Thank you. Vinayak and then Syed.
Yes, ma'am. Namaste, ma'am. I I'm P. Vinay Gupta from Bhavan Vidyalaya, Panchkula, Haryana, India. Today, my question to you is that in today's world, we come across many influences on social media and in our surroundings. And at the teenage age, we tend to influence by it um, and to influence it by it. So the major worry about it is how to identify which one to follow and how to overcome this confusion. Means teenagers tend to influence by some bad things, but how to overcome these situations.
Okay. Vinayak, I'm a little confused about how it relates to women leaders, but I will try and answer nonetheless. I think it I think you should think about how that influencer makes you feel about your life. Is it adding value to your life? You should be able to, and I think a lot of you, given what I'm told is a rigorous application process, all of you can think for yourselves and make informed decisions. Think when you're watching a video, does it make you think? Does it make you reflect, or does it make you feel bad about your life? Does it make you feel you don't have enough, or you want better, or does it make you feel like you need to do better things? So it's two different things, right? It make wanting to reflecting and making you want material things, or want more, or is it provoking you to think and want to do better? I think you should choose the videos that make you feel and reflect more on your life rather than wanting more material things. So I mean, I don't know if I've done justice to your question, but there you go. Syed, if you don't mind, I'll just pause and quickly look at that. If you have a follow-up question, key characteristics and skills, I would say there aren't very specific characteristics and skills that are only women specific, but like I said, inclusion also brings more diversity, more innovation, more creativity, right, in the solutions that are offered. So again, Nihar has a question. What are the challenges women leaders face throughout history? I mean, this is an interesting question in terms of gender stereotypes, right? Women are known to be weaker, women are known to not deal with power, women are known to, again, because of the things that I talked about, gender-based violence, because of the stereotypes, the roles that women are assigned typically, they have been known to not be leaders. But I mean, I hope the examples that I have given you and some of the names that you yourselves have given me prove to you otherwise, prove to you that women are as capable, vibrant, creative, and innovative leaders, right? Syed, and thanks for waiting.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, a warm welcome, ma'am. I'm Shraddha Hussain, an MP at the third Volt in Parliament from MS Education Academy, Hyderabad, Telangana, India. Ma'am, my question for you is, if you could weave a narrative of resilience and innovation from the experience of women leader at UN Women in India, how would you use this story to inspire teenage girls to remain their future and tackle the unique challenges they face today?
Woman, sorry, talking about resilience, I think there are plenty of stories that are around us. I mean, you have to look around you, look at examples like Malala, look at examples like Greta, you look at examples. There are so many. In fact, I would love to take this opportunity to talk to you about this book that UN Women has actually recently come out. It's called Hum When Women Lead. And one of the stories there is actually, Hania is talking about Mubina Mazri. There's so many examples, but so there is these adolescent girls like a lot of you who are, some of them, I mean, most of them are not even 18. And these are girls, if I'm not mistaken, they're either in UP or Jharkhand. They developed solar charged equipment to charge their mobile phones and to charge other things like listening to radio and all of that. They made this device by themselves during the COVID pandemic, when electricity, or their village was also suffering electricity issues. So there are numerous stories around you if you just have to go and look. And I think those are enough and more inspire, I think, not just young girls, but also young men like you, who should kind of be supportive of their mothers, sisters, potentially girlfriends and wives. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Great. Vinayak, is that an old hand? Tehzeeb, is that an old hand, or do you have more questions? And Prachi. And Asim has more questions again. Prachi?
Sorry, I forgot to lower my hand.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Very good evening, ma'am. I'm Prachi, influencer of World in Parliament. Ma'am, my question to you is, what basically UN is doing to mitigate or resolve the problem of, workplace discrimination? Because this is the one of the most factors which is, experienced by many women.
Absolutely. The workplace discrimination, or are you talking about sexual harassment, or just discrimination?
Ma'am, discrimination.
Okay, great. So again, I am going to just. So UN Women specifically works on these issues, and we have something called Women Empowerment Principles. And this is something that we are doing specifically with the private sector, which means the non-government sector, corporations and firms and big MNCs and so on. And we actually, you can Google this. Now I'm telling you to Google it. Where these are principles. So we're talking about ensuring that there are enough number of women, there are enough number of women in leadership, that there are flexible to ensure that all the roles that women play in their lives are accommodated, so on and so forth, so that the discrimination reduces, women are able to give their full potential in their roles as workers, but also their roles as other roles within all the other roles that they play, which are also really critical for the family and society, right? And so UN is ensuring that through sort of making people aware of these principles, and also ensuring that people are trained in these principles, that workplace discrimination, gender discrimination reduces. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. Asim and then Mariam.
Yeah, ma'am. So I had a follow-up question. Ma'am, do you believe in toxic feminism? And also, ma'am, what role can women play in supporting a healthy and inclusive feminist movement, and how can they avoid reinforcing toxic narratives?
Asim, can you tell me what is toxic feminism before you ask me whether I believe in it or not? Of course, I don't believe in anything toxic, yaar. Kyun chahiye toxic? But so I don't believe in taking anything to extremes. I think feminism is a very misunderstood word, and therefore a lot of people, without necessarily engaging with it, call it names, all kinds of names. So just like I don't think there is anything called toxic masculinity, I don't think there is space for any toxic anything, right? As far as men, I think if you believe that anybody on earth deserves a life of dignity and respect, so just like men deserve a life of dignity and respect, women deserve a life of dignity and respect, then you are, to my mind, a feminist. If you are willing to stand up to, if there is injustice happening, and this again answers somebody's question who wanted to be an advocate, I think it was Mario, if I'm not mistaken, but all of you in that sense, right? If there is injustice happening tomorrow, you at school, in colleges or whatever, if somebody is getting harassed, if somebody is getting treated differently because of whatever reasons, it's not just gender, maybe somebody is getting treated differently because of a disability. You might have a colleague or a student who's hard of hearing, and the teacher doesn't know it, and she's screaming at the poor fellow. And if you are able to just stand up there, that makes you a feminist, right? Because the idea is to believe in everyone's basic human potential, and to be able to then, taking it a further, stand up. If you have the rights and if somebody else doesn't, stand up for their rights. And I think men play an extremely crucial role in gender equality. Gender is not just women, it is all genders, right? It is all men, women, and all other spectrums, not just third or others, but all genders. And I think gender-based violence, for example, one of the most crucial things that as a society we need to fight against. I think men's roles in ensuring that gender norms change, and then also that gender-based violence reduces. I think men are crucial, and therefore I'm really, really glad to see so in this conversation today. And I think you're all going to together kind of take the toxic out of society. I have great hopes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mariam, Hania's side.
Yeah, ma'am. So my question is like, it's so painful, personally speaking, to see that women are so like underrepresented, and like even though we have equal rights and everything, like they say we have it, it's not like actually seen. There's still so much discrimination. And then people tell me you have to change the mindset and the mentality, and the mindset and the mentality. But that's hard to do. Is that really the case? Or is it something more? Is it something more?
It is hard to do, Mariam. Unfortunately, changing structures is hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
It takes generations, right? Like I said, from my grandmother to me, it took a long journey. It took a bunch of laws. It took social change for things to change. And it is hard, but that only means that we have to keep pushing. And
Right.
you have it easier than somebody who came before you, but it is your job to keep pushing so that the person who comes after has it even more easier, and you leave a better world behind. Right?
Right.
So, but I mean, I'm with you. It is frustrating sometimes. It is very difficult. Sometimes people just don't understand your point of view.
Exactly, yeah. The
But
other day in school, somebody told me that um pink is only a girl's color and blue is only a boy's color. We literally had a debate on that topic.
You should actually just on that, you should go look at, have you read Nipita Menon's book, Seeing Like a Feminist? I think it's available online. Probably available for free somewhere if you know the right
Okay.
website. As I cannot tell you which ones, but
Right.
Seeing Like a Feminist, she actually talks about how, there in earlier times there were no different clothing.
Yeah.
No gender was part of clothing. So the pink and blue is a very, very recent phenomena. Earlier, it was men who used to wear heels and not women. So all of these things, which is why gender is called a social construct, because it keeps changing,
Mm-hmm.
shifting. So go read that book. I think you'll really like it. And
Thank
I
you.
recommend it to all of you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Who's next? Syed?
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, I have another question. Ma'am, what imaginative strategies or conventional approach do you think to overcome the hidden barriers and challenges that prevent women from stepping into the leadership roles in the current society?
Unconventional approaches. Syed, it's too late in the night for me to think about unconventional approaches. No, I'm kidding. So a lot, I mean, till very recently, working with men was an unconventional approach. Now it's become more and more acceptable, and thankfully, people like you and our friend Asim think that it is important to be part of these conversations. But also, just there is a lot of work happening, pushing, ensuring that. So typically, again, because of stereotypes, women, even when there is skilling programs that are done for women, they were typically beauty parlor, stitching, nursing, that sort of roles. But now even the government is pushing to what are called non-traditional things like, mechanical repairs, driving, and so on and so forth. So you have state-sponsored programs which are pushing these approaches where they are thinking about, women who are now part of, Zomato Swiggy deliveries, women who are truck drivers, women who are driving buses, and so on. But again, everything has gender. There was a huge drive to get women to be conductors and bus drivers. If you don't have correct infrastructure, then such initiatives can fail. And this is a real example. I can't remember which state this was. I think it was Tamil Nadu. It was not Hyderabad, where they got a lot of women enrolled as bus drivers and conductors, but there weren't enough public toilets that were clean and available. And the whole thing failed. Women quit their job, left. So you need to ensure that the environment is also geared, and not just that you're pushing a superficial change, right? So while you're making innovative strategies, you have to also ensure that the things that need to be in place are already in place before you make these strategies available. I hope that answers your question. Johan.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, ma'am, I have a doubt about the UN peacekeeping force, right?
Yes.
So I've been watching the news lately, and I've also like been a bit concerned about like, okay, fine, the budget that according to somewhere I heard on the internet, I've heard that the UN peacekeeping force has only around like a budget of the New York city police. So that's which approximately comes, I think, around 3 or 4. I'm not exactly too sure of the cost. Because I feel that from my thought, I feel that the UN peacekeeping force and the UN agencies are very much underfunded. So I have a doubt what actually will happen within the next, let's say 10-20 years, where UN, the funding of the UN is cut, and will the UN still be able to run resiliently, and will it be able to still perform the job and promote things that it's able to do now, or will it actually be affecting women's security and women empowerment?
Johan, I must congratulate you on the extent of your reading. That's really commendable, given your age, and I'm very, very happy to see that. And great question. The UN is actually a collection of member states. So the UN doesn't have its own resources. It's not a profit-making organization, right? So basically, the member states contribute money to the UN, and that then kind of circles back into the work that people like me do within the countries, and also peacekeepers do within the conflict countries. So you are very right in saying that the resources are shrinking, and also global crises like Ukraine, global crises like Palestine suck resources. And therefore that also adds to the crunch of funding. Already as it is, funding is less, because the crises are increasing, climate, this, that, and the other, and then these kind of issues like Ukraine, Palestine, so on. And therefore, peacekeeping, then there are a lot of operations that are shutting down. And what you say, what you observe is very true, that that will have an adverse impact. And I mean, Afghanistan is a case in point, right? I mean, of course, it wasn't a UN mission, but a US mission. They retracted, and basically the Taliban is now ruling the country. So, and I mean, the UN works with whichever government is in place. So we are also kind of engaging with Taliban and doing what we can. But will that have an adverse impact on the populations? Yes, it will. And therefore, as a society, it is something that should concern us. It is not just what the UN will do. The UN will do what its member states will ask it to do and allow it to do, right? So it is grave, and it is what it is.
Yeah, I was also, because I'm a person who does a lot of research into global geopolitics, and I tend to research case studies maybe, and like I was also wondering about that within the UN Security Council, like they just recently called a meeting and everything, but I'm worried about that the UN itself is because of the global tussle between all the global powers, that because of multiple vetoes happening within the Security Council as well, will the Security Council be effective in controlling the global conflicts? Maybe, because I've definitely felt that it is more about country to country than within the UN making agreements.
Yes, there is, but there is an interesting sort of struggle politically also, Johan. You will notice that there is a certain power that the lesser developed, what is known as the global south, is slowly sort of finding its voice and also able to say their piece in the UN more and more. You will notice that the United States is actually not a member state of the United Nations, funnily enough, but they contribute, and they contribute as and when, depending on, for example, which president is in power, and whether it's the Democrats, Republicans, so on and so forth. Also, so depending on that, various factors and who's part of the Security Council. We've been trying for so long, India, to be part of the Security Council, and that's sort of the pitch that we've had for several years. So there is a lot of those global politics that happen. G20 has been a big sort of muscle flexing exercise that recently happened in India. So all of these sort of equations do play a role, and you're very right in kind of putting a question mark there in what kind of control is the Security Council able to exert. But having said that, it is one of the most powerful decision-making bodies. So one always has some hope that one kind of puts into that body. Asim and then, okay. Asim and then
Yeah, ma'am. A last question, ma'am. As you said, it takes time to have a change. What positive change in social attitudes towards gender equality have you observed? And how can we accelerate this process?
great. So I think, like I said, I mean, there have been huge changes. I mean, one of the things that I didn't mention, or maybe I mentioned in the passing, is that I actually did a PhD, interestingly, Asim, from the University of Hyderabad. And I see two of you at least who are from Hyderabad, where I actually looked at 3 generations of women from a particular community and the kind of changes that have happened in their lives. The first generation was women in their 80s and 90s who were born on independence. The second generation was born in the 70s. And the third generation is the women who were born, say, in the 80s or to 90s, right? And I think there is huge change that has happened in terms of the kind of education that women are able to get, the kind of work that they are able to, the space that they are able to get in terms of deciding what they want to study, deciding what they want to do for their work, deciding whether and who and when they want to marry, and also then making space within the household. These changes, like I said earlier, are not something, it requires individual, family, community, state, by which I mean government and institutions to change. And that is why it is a slow process. Like I said, again, optimism is key. For you to do what is possible as an individual, for those of you who have the potential and the resources to come together as a community to push for change. In my opening address, I spoke about how people create coalitions, right? Collectives who will push for change. So you've probably, I don't know if you've seen that, for example, a simple thing like boys hostel and girls hostel, the rules are different. Girls hostels generally ask the women to come back earlier. And in a lot of places, girls have gotten together and revolted against this, saying that this is not. It is not the girls who are in danger or girls who are doing something wrong. It is the society which is not safe. And we need to change society. We shouldn't be targeting my freedom, right? And so these changes are possible through individual, familial, and collective actions. And I think all of us is therefore responsible to bring about these actions in whatever ways possible. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
So, ma'am, definitely the session was very much interesting because I have seen the inputs from both the sides, the teenagers and you. So they eventually got to learn a lot from you. And I really appreciate the teenagers asking so many questions, and that to direct question, which was related to the topic. They were asking then and there. So that is really very nice. I can see Asim, Sayed, there's even many more. I cannot take the names of each one of you, so please don't take it like that. But I appreciate all of you being present over here. And ma'am, thank you so much for giving your time. Ma'am, I would really request you if you have any last message that you want to give to the teens or any last address that you want to say to them.
Absolutely. I think I agree completely with you. It has been really, really great interacting with all of you. Such great questions, so much enthusiasm. And I think, like I said, I hope that a lot of you kind of participate in this march towards gender equality in your individual capacities within your institutions, schools, colleges, and later in your workspaces. You need not directly work on gender to be a gender champion. I think all of you are on the right path, asking the right questions. Please keep this curiosity alive and absolutely great, bright futures for all of you. Good luck and great, you know, I think the future is in safe hands.
Definitely, ma'am. Even I was very much inspired when I was listening to all the questions that we were getting throughout the gender equality, because when we were teenagers, I don't think we were this much aware about what exactly the practical questions. When I heard about the pink and the way Asim said that I also am wearing pink, so there's no disparity that these people have in their mindset between blue and pink thing. So definitely, I really enjoyed the session throughout. I was listening to it and it was really very engaging. Ma'am, thank you so much. So on the behalf of Blub and Voltin Parliament, thank you so much. I would really want to extend our deepest thanks for accepting the invitation and enlightening all the teenagers as well as us for the session. I would really hope that we'll see you soon in another session where these people will be having more questions like this on some other topic.
Absolutely. Please feel free to call me, and thank you for spending your Friday evening with me. Have a lovely weekend and Khuda Hafiz.
Yeah, same to you, ma'am. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Thank you so much, guys. Take care.
Good night.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank
Bye,
you, ma'am.
everyone.
Bye, ma'am. Thank you so much.